All right. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Adventures in DevOps. Warren, welcome. Good to see you again.
Oh, thank you for inviting me back, Will. It's been great. Uh, it's interesting. I was looking for interesting facts for this particular episode, and I came across one by a writer that has gone viral on Twitter and other places. And her name Joanna Maciejewski, and she says, "I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing." Not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes.
Right.
And if you search that on Google, actually, you'll find no less than 10 guys who have co opted her words and are claiming them as their own, spreading the viralness out there. But I think it's very interesting because it's also the direction that we've been going, and I think it's relevant to today's episode.
Yeah, for sure. Because joining us today in the studio, Anthony Spiteri, we've had your longtime friend and coworker Michael Cade from Veeam on the show just a couple of episodes ago.
Yep.
So this will be fun. Anthony, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Warren. Glad to be here. Yeah, it's a big shoes to fill, literally following in Michael. He's a big man in more ways than one.
He looked only like 3 or 4 inches tall on my screen, so I don't really have a sense of scale there.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Just wait till you have to carry him in some random city around the world because of certain things going on. So then you'll realize just how big a man he is.
Yeah,
right on.
It's not education that's the great equalizer, it's remote video calls.
That's it.
Cool. Yeah. So we were going to talk a little bit, and this is going to be a fun episode because AI is pretty controversial. I feel like everyone's falling into one of two camps. Either, it's going to do everything for me, or it's the reincarnation of the evil overlord, and it's the worst thing to happen to humanity. And I think there's very few people that are in between those camps, at least very few people who are vocalizing what their actual opinion is, which is probably the case with a lot of things. But I think it's cool. So you've been working on quite a bit of stuff of integrating AI through like conversational prompt engineering, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating field. Like, I think there's certain elements of hype to it, without question. Like, we know that it's been hyped up, but I think about, just post-pandemic, we had the crypto blockchain DeFi hype, which was so huge for a long time, and people were like, "Yep, that's the thing. This is the future." And while that's still there or thereabouts, it's kind of dropped off in terms of its actual applicability to the world. But then the AI thing just came in and just went, "Here we go. Like this is here. It's coming big. It's coming strong." OpenAI did wonders with ChatGPT. All of a sudden, it was like, "What's ChatGPT?" on Twitter, or it was X. It was about the time that X was being bought, if I remember correctly, by Elon. And then all of a sudden we've got this amazing interface that does amazing stuff. And the first thing that I told it to do was to build a script for me. Like I think a lot of people in IT, they didn't ask it any specific questions or anything. They said, "Can you do this? Can you build me a script?" And I think so. I think a lot of us in the technical world, who are in that DevOps sort of world, or coding, or even infrastructure, this is the application they saw straight away for it.
Yeah, for sure. I think my initial use of it is I just asked it bad questions, because I didn't really see any value of it. And then I think it might have been actually one of your tweets that I saw where you did like a conversational example. And I was like, oh, damn, I never thought of doing that. And so now a lot of my interaction with it is it's replacing my Google search because, like in my job, I switch between Terraform and Ansible and GCP and AWS, and just the context switching is huge. And so when I try to remember, like, oh, I know I need to do this, but I don't remember the exact syntax, I've found myself in the habit of asking ChatGPT exactly how to do it. And it's like, oh, yeah, just do this.
Yeah, it's definitely, and this is part of the, you talked about, you love it, hate it, the trust and whatever it is, but I think a lot of people have defaulted to it and don't use Google, which is why we've seen Google go pretty damn hard with their Gemini relaunch a couple of weeks ago, right? Like that was an interesting tit for tat. Like we're going to launch Gemini, then OpenAI have come in on the Monday and doing their thing, and they released the 4.0, and it was an interesting week. And then Microsoft came and did its thing, and yeah, and then Apple's done it yesterday. But I think that's the interesting part of it, is that it has replaced Google in terms of that search capability, because we inherently trust it. Though should we? I think that's the big thing. And what we get out of there, I think people just trust from the start, but maybe we shouldn't. But I think, you've done enough, I've done enough in there to probably trust it to a certain extent. You do have to double check things for sure. Like it's not, but then again, we were at the same place with search before. I mean, even Wikipedia, people were saying about Wikipedia, don't trust Wikipedia. I remember at uni, never use Wikipedia as a citation. Right. We could be wrong. So it's the same sort of stuff. We're just going over it again.
Yeah, for sure. And like the thing a few years ago was copy and paste the answer out of Stack Overflow. And there was actually a running joke, like, can we build a VS Code plugin that just copies the right answer from Stack Overflow and adds it to my editor? And I think to a large extent, ChatGPT is that plugin.
The plugin for sure exists. I think you two may have been way more ahead of me in interacting with ChatGPT than I was. I don't know if I saw the benefit initially. I was like, the code isn't going to be perfect. There's going to be issues there. And now, since I've started using it, I definitely are more on the side of, I see the long-winded answers and I'm like, can I get back to just the one word or one sentence answer here, please? Because like otherwise I feel like I have to spend like half an hour training it on what the system prompt should be so that it just gives me the direct answer that I want.
Yeah, and that's that's the power of that prompt engineering. So I think I've been big on this in terms of I've written a few articles on it, and especially this year since I've been using it for the past 18 months or so to do that. You've got to kind of learn how to manipulate it in the right way and sort of train it to say the right things. And don't be afraid getting angry at it as well. And just like I really treat it like a human. Like I actually get frustrated with the thing, and I'll swear at it, and I'll call it an asshole. And I'm not sure if I can swear in the show, but like I'll just call it every name under the sun, right? And it's kind of, it doesn't. Sometimes it blinks a little bit and goes, "Hey, sorry, I was just trying to do my job." But I think the more that you interact with it, and the more that you treat it like you are maybe talking to a dev team, actually, I don't know whether that's even au fait, because if you talk to someone like that, you might be up for HR, right? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is you talk to it like a human, you learn how to work and manipulate it and coerce it, and you get the best out of it once you learn how to deal with it. And I think that's the same for any sort of platform or large language model that's out there that we are interacting with these days.
So I think, sorry, I'm going to jump in here real quick, Warren, because I think there's a big takeaway here. Anthony, you are our agent zero. So when ChatGPT or any AI platform becomes sentient and actually has real world capabilities, I suspect you're going to be the first person they take out because you were just such an asshole to it.
It's coming
so
at me.
we need to follow you on X, because when you stop tweeting, we know things have changed.
Or it just respects me that much that it puts me in charge. Second in command. That's my strategy.
It's for sure Rocco's basilisk, right? You should be helping it come to power. Otherwise, you're going to have a problematic future there.
Absolutely.
So you did, you were telling us before we started recording, which sometimes I feel bad because like sometimes the best parts of this podcast happen before I hit the record button, but I'll try to circle it back in. You were telling us about an app that you built and used some AI platforms as the data source for that, right? Just to sort of like your own self-learning journey on how to best utilize this.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I mean, a lot of us have got ideas about, just apps, and we walk through life as technical people and often wonder, can we solve a problem? But I think, like I told you then, and I'll tell you again, like I'm a hacker at best, and I think you put it really well, Will, when you say if you give me a blank VS Code window, I can't do anything. Like I've always been, even when I did computer science at uni, failed it miserably, got expelled from university, decided it wasn't for me. But I've always been able to read code and understand code. When I was back working as a service provider and hosting, I was hosting websites. I worked with a lot of developers. A lot of them are really bad. and they produced really bad code. And you got to think back then it was ASP.NET, the original
Oh, yeah.
.NET. It was Perl, it was PHP, it was all that. So I learned how to actually, read code pretty well and understand what it was doing and try and trace it back. And if there was a memory leak, go back and tell them. So I've always been good around the hacking of code, but never as a creator of original code, if you know what I mean. So to that end, but I always used to, I could build a website, I could do this or that. So I've always had that in me. But then this particular idea that I had, it's very fun, it's very weird. But I was actually on Michael's 90 Days of DevOps this year talking about this actually. So basically it's an app that it's a location-based services app built with Google location-based APIs and geo searching and all that kind of cool stuff and places and all those cool APIs that Google has to find and locate places that offer black pudding. Now I'm not too sure. Do you guys know what black pudding is?
I do, but tell us, make sure all our listeners know, because this is not something to gloss over.
Yeah. So black pudding is basically, it originated in Europe. It's basically a sausage or a sort of roll that is effectively made with pig's blood as the main ingredient, but then other bits of suet and oat and spices and whatnot. And it's a delicacy in the UK, made in different ways. It's typically had for breakfast as part of a full English, a full Irish, full Scottish. But then in places like Germany and other parts of Central Europe, it's basically blood sausage. And in Argentina and in Spain, it's called morcilla. So effectively, I've always loved it. I fell in love with it. It was hard to get. And I was sitting at a cafe one day here in Perth where we don't get it everywhere. I was thinking, man, I really want to go find a cafe that has black pudding. So that was the idea for the app. Right.
And I feel like, because I'm obviously from the US, but I feel like that is such a British thing to do, like to travel the world and be like, where can I get black pudding here?
Yeah, and I'm not even British, I'm Australian. Yeah. So that's even weird in itself, right? But
right.
Actually last week I was in Fort Lauderdale and I found a place like 20 minutes from the hotel. So, but going back to the sort of DevOps prompt engineering part of this is that I had this idea, and because I know how to construct, I know what makes up an application, right? There's a front end, there's a back end, there's UI, there's database, there's APIs. I know what makes it up. I was basically able to prompt engineer my way to a bit of an MVP. It was about August last year. I was kind of there, just kind of hacking away at it after hours, spending lots of time on ChatGPT. It would give me some code. I'd put it into VS Studio. I'd load it up. Would that work? No. Let's refactor it. Let's go in. Let's refine. So basically months of doing that. In fact, the GitHub commit, I've got it as a private repository on GitHub still, because obviously I haven't done one. It's not a public sort of project, but I've done about 700 or 800 commits over the past sort of, I've stopped recently, but over 6 months, right? So there was a lot of commits that I was going in, a lot of iteration. But that's how it grew. I was like, okay, let's start strong. Can we use the Google API to build a map? And then can I prompt ChatGPT to now build me a HTML interface that will actually view that map? And then can we build a Flask application to render some APIs that call that? And then can we build some JavaScript, which will work out the maths to be able to work out the location between 2 points? So all that I was able to articulate into ChatGPT. And at the end of the day, got something that, surprise, worked. And I never forget the first actual time where I saw the map pop up with a location. And that was amazing to me, that I was able to effectively prompt my way without really understanding, being a creator coder, and get something working. And that to me blew me away, because that I think shows the absolute possibilities that these large language models offer the world, right?
For sure. And I think one of the cool things about that is the fact that you emphasized multiple times that it was prompt engineering. So you're just having a conversation with the AI tool. And then, so whenever you ask it something, then your follow-up questions, do you just continue as if you were speaking with a normal human, or do you try to reference something back in the conversation earlier so that it knows what you're referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. The first sort of iterations, this was ChatGPT 3.5 to start with, then got into 4. It was very frustrating at times. It wasn't very good at. You had to kind of refeed it the code at times. Like here's a snippet of code. Like there's something's going wrong. Here's the code again, and then it would suggest the changes, and then I would go, okay, modify that in full and without brevity into this latest code base. Because if you didn't do that, it would basically give you like placeholders and kind of dots and that sort of thing. And obviously when you're cutting and pasting between here and, in Visual Studio, because there are some plugins that go straight into Visual Studio, which might have been easier, but I like ChatGPT and it was working well. But that was kind of the frustration, having to kind of refeed it information. Sometimes would get things really wrong. So you have to go through 5 or 10 iterations of it before it became right. And then you ran out of your ChatGPT hourly sort of prompts, and that would be a great natural sort of place to stop, because I found myself working until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, just addicted to this, right? But back in the days where ChatGPT was still limited, that was good, because I was like, right, you've hit your prompt limit. You can't do anything in 2 hours. It's like, right, probably I should stop now. And, that was a good natural break. I'll go to sleep and I'll come back. But it was frustrating, right? But you had to be patient to be able to, get the code refined over time, and to the point where you're working with the LLM to make it sort of work with you, not against you.
How does that compare to doing it yourself? Like, I mean, if we're just comparing the frustration, right? Like, I know when I write code, I'm not very good. I write it and bang my head against the desk, because it's not working. And when I do it with ChatGPT, I'm banging my head against the desk, but I'm shouting explicitives, towards a particular company for the product and user experience they provided me.
It's directed anger at that point.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. I honestly think it's the same. That feeling. I mean, when I used to do this, outside, but not as complex as this, by the way. Obviously, the stuff that I would do in previous years was little things. But I know that I got the same sense of achievement. I think this sense of achievement was the same. I think you're just getting to it quicker, right? And it's a little bit more of like, whoa. And sometimes it's like, holy shit, it's got it in one. Like the best times were when you explain it something, especially so the back-end stuff. The logic with the back end and the maths, I found that it was pretty good. Like it was really good. The most frustrating part is actually the UI, is the interface. It's that part. It's the CSS. It's horrible at CSS. So to get the design right and
aren't we all?
Oh yeah, we all are. And ChatGPT is no different. But I think I'm much better at CSS now than I was, before I started this. And to that point, you obviously learn as you do this. But that was a real frustration, trying to get the UI to change, or let's change a button here. And I know that a good programmer would be able to do this in a second. I think that was the frustrating part, knowing that someone who knew CSS would be able to round that button a little bit more easily. But then ChatGPT had a massive problem doing it. So that was frustrating. But all the hard stuff, the mathematics around, the geolocation and all that kind of stuff, it would nail almost in one off those prompts.
One of the things that I feel like I learned from my interaction with ChatGPT and other AI tools is improving my communication with real world humans. Because I've noticed this trend lately where we use words like it and that and those. And I was talking with ChatGPT earlier, like it would always get lost whenever I referred to it, because it was trying to guess what it referred to. But then I started looking at conversations I was having with real people, and I started to notice the same thing. Like, oh wait, someone says, hey, did that get fixed? And then if you're talking to 3 people, there's 3 different versions of what that is referring to. So I've actually found like a hidden benefit there, that whenever I'm talking to other people, I use those generic words less and try to specify more clearly what it is I'm actually referring to.
Yeah, and that's the part about being concise and efficient with it to do it to what you want. To be fair, it's getting better at kind of understand, because it's got the memory now. So specifically with ChatGPT, with that memory, you don't need to I had some crazy idea. I always want to go viral on TikToks or whatever, and I'm always thinking about ideas. It hasn't happened yet. So, one day it'll happen. But I was thinking about ideas about what crazy thing could a 45-year-old dude do. And I thought, I play basketball. I love playing basketball at the front of the house. And so I went to ChatGPT and I said, what do you think about this? What do you think about, some basketball dude, mid-40s, probably shouldn't be playing basketball, but does. What if I take a video every day of shooting my shots and, could that be something? And it came back and said, that's a great idea. Have you thought of this, and that? Do this, and that. I was like, okay, cool. It's not really a good idea. And then I went away. And then about 3 weeks later, after they released the 4.0 release, or is it Amiga? I forget what the O stands for, whatever it is there. I came back to ChatGPT and I said, hey, how you doing today? And this was a new window, and it came back and said, I'm doing fine. Just wondering, how'd that basketball thing work out for you?
Oh, wow.
Like weeks earlier, right? So that memory, and I was like, what the hell? Like that was crazy. Actually, I really thought that was scary and cool at the same time.
Right. That's a whole interesting aspect now of, because there's a lot of tools for like building habits and like getting like specifically in fitness, the big part about fitness journeys is accountability. I hadn't thought about using ChatGPT as a partner in that conversation.
Yeah. Well, actually, I interviewed on the podcast that I go on, I interviewed a guy who was one of the early ML AI innovators, actually invented Shazam, actually. That thing.
Sweet.
And sold it. It was great. I didn't even know he did that, but he told me about that. But Deepak was his name. I'll get the full name after. But he was telling me that he uses it he tells it to be a specific type of, what's the word? Sort of health. I'm trying to think of the word. A practitioner of health or something. So it's a specific type of mental coach. And then you tell ChatGPT, you are this type of mental coach, and then it will be that mental coach. So, Will, you're right on. People are definitely using it for that sort of mentorship. Just tell it to act in that way, and then it will effectively try to be that person, which is interesting.
As soon as we're done here, I'm going to go tell my ChatGPT, dude, you are my David Goggins. So, what is your podcast? Just so that anyone listening to ours can go check yours out if they aren't already.
Yeah. So it's Great Things with Great Tech. So gtwgt.com. It's been going I started in the depths of the pandemic, actually. Like it was another one of those crazy ideas that I had about doing something around great technology. And 84, 85 episodes later, it's still going pretty strong. Just had Jack Resider on. Actually, if you know Darknet Diaries, so that was like a massive coup. I still don't know how that happened, but managed to get him on, and we had a great 1 hour conversation about all things Darknet Diaries. And that was almost like a highlight. And I kind of joked with myself. I'm like, well, where do I go now? I've kind of got that's kind of a highlight. Everything else is going to be pretty shitty from here on in. No. But I just love talking to great tech companies. So I get great benefit out of that. Learn a lot while I'm talking to people, and have a good time doing it.
That's been the biggest benefit to me, to being the host of this show. I think I've been the host of this show for a couple of years now. But the cool thing about it is I have great guests come on the show like you, and it's just a filter for me. It's like there's all this stuff going on in technology, and like the big challenge is how do you build a long-running career in tech and maintain your relevance so that you stay employable. And this has been a fantastic tool for that. Just having people like yourself on the show who give me like the TLDR version of your journey, and I filter and use that in my own career.
That's awesome. Yeah, we definitely should. I mean, this is the best way to learn, is by talking to people and getting information out of people, right? So we all have such unique experiences, and we all do things slightly differently in this world. And who would have thought you'd be talking to someone who built an app about black pudding, right? Like that's
right.
But we can use that as a very tangible, example of how to use prompt engineering for good. And everyone should be everyone should be looking at prompt. If you've got an idea, just talk to ChatGPT. I said that to the dude across the street. he's a young kid, 26 years old, kind of still living at home, and he's trying to sort of think about, what he's going to do in his life. And I said, just go talk to ChatGPT, go and ask it, tell it what your hobbies are, give it a bit of background, and maybe it lights a fire underneath you, right? That's the power of the technology from a good side. I mean, there's also the bad side to it, like you mentioned before as well.
Yeah, so I have to admit, the first time I tried black pudding, like I didn't know what it was, and then I learned what it was and had the opportunity to try it. I was like, oh man, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I have to admit it was kind of good.
Yeah, it's kind of good. I think a lot of people just don't like it because of what it is, but
Yeah.
I challenge people to say, well, we eat literally like red meat, which is literally got blood like oozing out of it when you cook it. You ever cooked a steak? The blood comes out. So I think to that point, it's a very much a mental thing when you say about what it is versus what it tastes like, which is just salty goodness.
Yeah, and that's the irony of it is I have no problem taking a piece of steak before I cook it, and looking around, cutting a little piece off and eating it raw. I have no problem doing that. But then when it came to blood pudding, I was like all squeamish, and I was like, dude, harden up.
It's definitely mental. And but then again, I don't know have you tried haggis?
No, I haven't tried haggis.
Because haggis is a little bit more acquired, because I definitely tried that. I was like, look, if I can do black pudding, and I talk about it all the time, I'm going to do haggis. So I got like a haggis roll from the local Scottish butcher here, gave it a bit of fry up, and then it wasn't palatable. So I think, and I think because in my head I I knew what it was, but I didn't grow up with it, so I didn't like it like I did with black pudding. So it's funny how that psyche works, because I still ate it, mind you, lots of condiment, but I still do it. But yeah, it's not something that I'd probably go and have again. But yeah, there we go.
So Warren, where did you grow up?
Originally, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay.
But I've traveled around all over the United States, New York, Wisconsin, California, but right now I ended up in Switzerland, and so I have actually spent a lot of time traveling around Europe. And I did get the benefit of opportunity to have blood sausage one time in Poland, and honestly, like, I could take it or leave it. I think it's interesting to try. Like, it's not disgusting or anything like that. I think it's just, if I have my options. There's a lot of good meat options in Poland. Like
Poland's great. I love. Yeah, Poland actually is renowned for a very good blood pudding, actually. So you're probably in the best place to have it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like, it was good. Like, I enjoyed it. A list of things, like, there are some unique options available. I've only gotten in Poland, and when I'm there, I have to go through the whole list of things that I can only get there before I come back.
Yeah, Warsaw is actually one of my favorite cities. I've only been there once, spent a week there, probably in about 2018, I think it was. But yeah, that was great. The food was amazing. Great city. Yeah, one of my favorite places that I visited, Poland, actually, and Boston as well. Just quietly, do love my Boston.
So as much value as we can get from using ChatGPT to find blood pudding close to us. Speaking of which, did you release your app? Is it publicly available, or?
Yeah, the app's out there. It's at findmyblackpudding.com. So and also findmyblackpudding.com. You can go in there, and it'll ask for your location. It'll tell you where the closest one is. So it's live and it works. And when I show people, they go, "That's interesting," and then they go, "What? Who would have thought?" But actually, so to take it a step beyond the black pudding, so actually, I actually built it. So again, leveraging ChatGPT, we pivoted, myself and my developer, ChatGPT, we pivoted a little bit at one point and kind of said, well, this could actually be, we've built a location-based app here. So let's build it as sort of independent as possible of the actual product, that being black pudding. So effectively, there's a configuration file which has all the sort of black pudding information, the nomenclature and images and all that kind of stuff. But that can be easily replaced now and basically put with anything that you want. So I guess the idea moving forward is that if it takes off, it's to SaaSify it a little bit and basically, if it could be when I retire from Veeam software, it could be my next thing. But to that point, it's more than just the black pudding. Obviously, if anyone kind of wants to try and find my weird x.com, like it'll basically work for that as well. So that was always the idea as well. So it wasn't just the black pudding, but it was just to build something that was maybe had some sort of appeal to any sort of person moving forward at some point.
Yeah, and you also have used that experience to tie this back into your work over at Veeam, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm lucky at the moment to be on the working group for our generative AI R&D. So I work with our R&D guys, with product management, and from a strategy point of view, Michael Cade being in the same team, to kind of lead the way there in terms of thought leadership and understanding about what the technology can offer us from a backup perspective in the data protection space. So that's been really cool. Last week at VeeamON, we had our major conference for the year, VeeamON 2024. I was able to get on stage and live demo our next generation AI assistant, which is built into our Veeam One, which is Veeam One's kind of our monitoring product that we've had for the longest time. So that plugs into Veeam Backup and Replication. It plugs into our hypervisor support, our public clouds, our M365. It's kind of like a central reporting engine. So what we're doing we've built the RAG-based LLM, so Retrieval Augmented Generation, which goes out and leverages the APIs on the platform to then contextually bring that in and then effectively use an LLM to then, when you prompt something, it's using the RAG-based retrieval for the API context, and then it puts together its answers. So it's pretty cool, right? And we showed that off last week. We showed it getting a threat report. So we've got a threat center, and it gave us a description on the threat center. And then because it was like a really long sort of report, we said, well, tell me, what should we focus on? So again, talking to this in a natural way, not having to look at a dashboard. This is kind of what I feel is the benefit of these natural language interfaces, is that you can just chat with it in a normal way to get the information. And certainly with a product like Veeam One, you definitely want to try and get to the crux of what's going wrong quickly. And traditionally, I guess as infrastructure guys, we've always had those dashboards, right? And you've got to visually have a look. If something's red, that's bad. And that is a good way of finding out. But if you're able to naturally interface with that sort of platform and say, hey, tell me what's bad and tell me why it's bad and how do we fix it? And then it gives you all these responses. I think that's powerful. In fact, I believe that it is powerful, right?
I agree.
Have you managed to figure out some maybe quick tricks or common things that you've teased out that you're appending or adding to all of your prompts to really make a huge impact? Like, I think I've read some studies that have suggested saying, oh, you'll be rewarded $1 million if you get this question right, like actually has a noticeable impact on the result. And while I hesitate to put that in all of my prompts, like I can imagine doing certain things or certain keywords has a huge impact for you.
Funnily enough, I haven't done that. I do, if I think about how I initially chat to the chatbots, I will, after an answer, I will say, cool, thanks. Now let's move on to something else. Or cool, all right, I'll go, all right, now. So I do, the way that I started is always like a bit of affirmation, I suppose, to the natural language robot that we're speaking to, if it is actually a robot, though it's just a bunch of text that gets generated, right? But yeah, I definitely try and interact with it in a certain way to make sure that I'm positive with it, if that makes sense. But I don't think I've ever rewarded it to a certain extent. I wonder how it would go with that. I'm just trying to think. Maybe I'll try that next time I'm on.
I mean, there's an interesting question there of whether or not the positive affirmation, it gets into some sort of feedback loop that actually confirms that the conversation ended in a successful way and pulls it in. I mean, I think that's on the individual companies that we work with. Like, is that something as a company that pushes out an AI model that users can interact with, something that you're actually considering?
I think the thing that we need to work out as a data platform, where we're working on now even more like biggest threats within cyber and malware in the systems, it's really just to get to the crux of the problem as soon as possible without kind of farting around, I think. So I think for us, while we do want to interact with it naturally, that's just as a mechanism to get to that problem quicker. And it's funny, a lot of the chatbots today are being used, I feel being used in a negative. Like I look at Copilot and how Microsoft is pushing that. It's really pushing it from the point of view of how lazy can you be? Like, let's not get to a meeting, but hey, Copilot will have your back and he'll give you the transcript and give you a too long didn't read of the meeting. So you can be lazy and not go to the meeting, right? I do feel, and I've been to a bunch of Microsoft events over the past couple of months. We've been guests there, and I've had a bit of a keynote sort of slot there. And yeah, that's the notion I took away, is that Microsoft's big sell is based on a negative for this particular product, right? And I don't think I think that's what they've got. I think Office productivity and Microsoft and their productivity suite has always been about how do you do more with less, right?
Right.
And their Copilot absolutely lets people do more without almost doing anything. But for us, from a backup platform perspective, how can you ask it to say, check my backups? Is there any malware in that backups? Give me the list of backup repositories or backup points that have malware in it. Okay, cool. I can see that. And now maybe in the future, let's clean that up. You know what I mean? Or let's recover from a point that wasn't with malware. So I think we're able to get to that a lot quicker rather than fumbling through some screens and going through and clicking through and looking at restore points and whatnot. We can leverage the power of the LLM to do its thing, because it's smart in a way, and it knows how to best analyze that data that it gets and surface it in the best possible way.
Are there concerns about accuracy there? Like, I can imagine, hey, are our backups usable? And the LLM says, yeah, of course, they're totally great. We've got them. They're stored in multiple places and on physical tape, of which just is not remotely true.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the beauty of the agent comes in. So the agent and the RAG. So the RAG is obviously pulling the APIs, and as long as the prompt hits the keywords that the agent is sort of manipulating, it's basically a bunch of, I think I saw a meme saying that, is it AI or just a whole bunch of ifs? I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's pretty true. But yeah, so to your point, absolutely, there needs to be refinement and implicit trust that what you're getting is correct. And it goes back to our first part of the conversation, right, where we're talking about, do you trust it? Well, you kind of just have to at that point. But knowing that you've got it from live data, I think adds an element of trust to it.
It's basically picking up where intent matching left off before ML models, basically just identifying which of these flows is the user actually looking at. But rather than having to explicitly code every single one of them, you can just fundamentally ask the LLM, which API should end up called to retrieve the appropriate data, and then running that back to the user.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think going back to your basketball story earlier, you could even use that, identify something, and then provide that feedback back to it and say, oh, that's something I should take a look at later. And there's a possibility that at some point in the future, it's going to say, hey, did you ever do that thing?
Yeah, it's really good. Actually, I might write that down. If we can put that in the product, yeah. No, but I think that basically comes down to the model that you're using as well, right? Like, obviously, if you're using your own data with a specific public model, I think that's cool and that's okay. But I think you'd get that from using ChatGPT 4.0 naturally, because it has got that memory built into it, right? So if you augment the data with a smarter model, then you're going to get those benefits. And I think it's only going to get better, right? Like the difference in the step up between even what 4.5 Turbo did and 4.0 was crazy in terms of speed and accuracy and that sort of thing. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's where we want to get to, like prompt it. The other thing as well, which I mentioned last week, was that if you think about this, you don't need to be a backup admin. In our world, you don't need to be a backup admin or a DevOps guy to be able to interact with this thing. Now, as an app owner, given that you've got the right level of RBAC, and you can definitely build RBAC into it, because we've got APIs that are based on certain levels of accessibility. So we've got RBAC in our APIs, right? So if I log in as a certain user, I'm an app user, right? So I'm not a full-blown backup admin, but I'm an app user. I can jump on the Veeam AI assistant. And I go, hey, I've got an app running. It's backed by an MS SQL database. I think it's the virtual machine VM 006. Is that being backed up? And then it'll go out, do its thing, come back and say, hey, yep, that's being backed up. It's got this many restore points. It looks all good, right? So from an app owner perspective, being able to do that, and then think about that from another level up, from a C-level or a business owner or someone on the board, who just wants to basically go in and see if everything's okay. Are we passing our regulatory compliance? Is there a checkbox? So they can go in and go, hey, tell me about my security posture. Am I passing all my regulations? And I think that would be able to come through instead of them logging in or getting a report or having to deal with dashboards or whatever it might be, or a CLI. I think that also is a pretty big, tick in this sort of way to interface with these platforms.
For sure. There's a definite 2001 Space Odyssey element to that. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that.
Yeah, that's
Is that the right movie? Did I mix those up?
No. I think you got that. Yeah, that was HAL. Yeah, that was HAL, which I learned. Do you know why it was called HAL?
I've heard it before, but I can't remember the answer.
It's one less than IBM. So
That's right.
HAL is what IBM one removed. And they did that on purpose because IBM was the big baddie back then, right? In terms of computing. So yeah, they named it HAL. It worked pretty well.
Has there been any sort of follow-up or concern regarding, I think there was a LLM integrated into, I think it was Canadian Airlines support service, who had promised reduction in prices or something like that, and the court actually held them to what the LLM was saying.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much gray area around legality still, which we have to work out. Where everyone's rushing to do it. I mean, you saw Elon's tweet. I'm not sure you saw Elon's response to Apple yesterday. He's basically so Apple obviously working with OpenAI, and then Elon's gone, okay, well, no one's going to use an Apple iPhone in my companies anymore because he's got a beef with OpenAI. He doesn't trust him, right? And he's just kind of said that. So I think we're still kind of there, but he has a fair point. Are we rushing to this to be able to put a full-blown AI on the data on your phone so that you open up everything on your phone to an AI possibly? I don't know. It's still a bit scary. I mean, I trust technology. I've been on record and, I've talked to security guys. I don't know who I was talking to about security. I was on a security podcast. And I said, look, I trust. Actually, it was Jack Resida. I was talking to him about that. It's like he's on the opposite end where he doesn't trust it, where I'm like, you know what? People know, and they're going to know if one way or another. So, yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's, maybe I'm with you. I don't think it's noticeably worse than other things. There are certain areas in where we should command more responsibility for certain companies that are doing things on their devices or their applications that we're using, whether or not we trust them holistically versus whether or not they're using AI. I feel like that's not a huge differentiator. I mean, I think Apple's been training models on your personal data on Mac OS for a little while now, and maybe I trust that. I may trust a little bit less some other big companies by name that have operating systems who are taking snapshots continuously. I mean, there is a. Yeah.
Have they gone back on that? I think
so. Now it's it will be off by default. Yeah. So this is like Windows 11. It will be off by default taking snapshots.
Still there.
And it will actually start being encrypted using Windows Hello. And I'm like, was it not encrypted before? I don't. So, I mean, there were questions there. And so this is where I'll say, commands responsibility and you trust them. And I think certain companies have not gotten to that level of trust for us. So whether or not they're using AI or not is sort of a separate problem.
Yeah,
I think the biggest issue there is there's going to be stuff on my screen. For work, I almost totally get. Yeah, sure. I want to go back to that code that I was writing 6 months ago. I don't remember where it was, which repository, that bug, etc. Please find that for me. But I think the sell there is personal data, and I'm like, I have Discord open at a video stream for. It's like I don't need that to be saved, please.
Yeah, and I mean, Facebook got. I mean, it's only recently, where Facebook got slammed for their leakage of data. How quickly we forget, right? And that was nothing compared to what we potentially have with this, right? And the amount you got to think. I mean, how many users does ChatGPT have today? I've lost count, but the amount of data that's going in there is huge, right? It's huge, and I know even today I was trying to work out a bit of I've actually been at Veeam for nearly 8 years, and in Australia you get long service leave, and then you get pro rata long service leave. So I was trying to actually work out. I didn't know anything about how to work it out, so I just kind of asked it. Okay, at my hourly rate, I've been here for 8 years. What's my current state of my long service leave if I was to leave today? And it worked it out. But now it's got that data somewhere in that system, right? In that chat.
Yeah. I feel like one of the missing components in the whole trust issue is accountability. Because I think some level of distrust is warranted, but the thing that's really missing is accountability. You know, if you look at all of the examples of security breaches where personal data has been exposed, there's absolutely no reason for companies to invest in security, because the worst case scenario is you have to pay for 6 months of credit monitoring for a few people. And of that, only the ones that take you up on the offer, which is a very small number. So companies aren't incentivized at all to be good stewards of their data. And I think until we change that, we will have trust issues and more data leaks.
Yeah, we talk about this often, obviously from a cyber malware sort of perspective, you know, trying to sort of work around, well, you are going to get hit. It's a matter of, you know, I hate saying it, but it's a matter of when, not if, right? And typically it's going to be through some sort of weak point in your systems, whether it be a poorly configured API that has, you know, open to the world access, or a system that's open, or through a vulnerability, a CVE, whatever it might be. You're going to get hit. So maybe just be prepared for that. And I think the news outlets like to jump on these leaks like it's the biggest like affront to our whole way of being, that my credit card information or my date of birth has been, you know, stolen by somebody, you know, exfiltrated. But I think, like to your point, is it really that bad? So, you know, I guess certain data is bad. Like I remember, and there was an episode of the Darknet Diaries where Jack was talking to someone who got into and hacked a children's app that was like a children's iPhone or something, but it had children data in there, right? And that got leaked to the dark web, right? And that was bad because that was information that could have been, because it had their home address and their names and all that kind of stuff. Now, that sort of information you don't want to get out there, because there are evil people that will use that for bad. But generally speaking, if people have my phone number, my email address, and my credit card number, I guess I'm okay with that. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's just like it's the world we live in.
Absolutely, I was going to say there's a price to pay for the freedom and the way that we live in this world, right? We want everything now. We want to be able to tap a card and do that and that, but then we get like a massively affront if we do have that data leaked. We can't have it both ways, is my way of looking at it.
I mean, I'll challenge any company to do this. I am happy to give you my data if you can once and for all actually serve me a relevant ad that I do care about. Because you know, it still just hasn't happened. Actually, to the previous point, my CEO was giving a pretty great talk on security and implications there, and you brought this up, Will, about actually does the law need to change? And it's interesting because we have our business in Switzerland, and Switzerland's the only country, as far as we've been able to identify, that has non-corporate laws for leaking data, but individual penalties if you are an executive of a company that encourages or does not lean into protecting user data, up to, I think it's like $250,000 fine and potentially more depending on what actually happens. You are individually liable for that, whereas no other country really has that. And you can even get insurance on, oops, we leaked customer data, and then these news companies come and pick it up, and it almost serves as an advertisement for them. Hey, did you hear about this company that leaked their data? Now you know about them. You know, positive reinforcement. You're gonna go and actually potentially buy that brand now, so they're being rewarded. I would really like to see the news outlets actually lean into helping us as well. I think public opinion can go a long way, and I don't know if you have any particular thoughts there.
I think public opinion is strong. Like I know in Australia we had some really big leaks. Optus had a breach, Medicare, Medibank. There's been a few big ones. The Optus one was probably the bigger. Optus is like our Verizon or one of our big carriers over here, and they had a massive leak through an API that was open, right? It was an open API, so data exfiltration. It wasn't an attack. They didn't take down any systems, but that did make the government act and put the onus back on other corporations to make sure that they at least were compliant in some way, right? So there's mandates that have been released because of that, like checks that you have to kind of follow. So yeah, the media has made things positive, but again, such a grey area that I think country to country, it's just so different. I think the latest one that's still a bit weird is a Ticketmaster one that's still kind of out there, right? That was Snowflake was the platform there. Snowflake hasn't really been hit too hard by that, and Ticketmaster hasn't released any details as to what got leaked yet. So we're still kind of waiting on that one, but that's another big one of late.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a really good follow-up from there is like a good reminder of Snowflake and their customers all have certifications proving that they're secure, and that didn't really get them anything. So it's a good reminder that these things have no indication that you are secure. Like if your internal practices aren't actually being monitored, your policies aren't actually being followed, they don't really amount to much.
Yeah, and to that point, the way that we've been talking about it at Veeam, and we spent the last year basically scaring the shit out of people at roundtables, talking to them about how they should be ready for this sort of stuff, and then have you got good data protection as part of that strategy. But I think the dark web and the pointy end that's still getting pointier, right? Like being able to use LLMs, going back to the prompt engineering and LLM. I was writing encryption algorithms in the early days because I wanted to show off a bit of a demo at last year's conference, and I was able to find an open S3 bucket and encrypt that bucket, and I did that all with ChatGPT. Now, it told me that I shouldn't use it, and I shouldn't use this because it was bad, but I basically, again, coerced it and prompt engineered my way into getting it done. They have got more guardrails on today, so if you actually go to ChatGPT today and try and say, write me a ransomware script that does this, this, and that, you've got to kind of really coerce and work with it and massage it to get that script out. Okay.
Yeah,
you should be able to still do it. But that said, on the dark web, there's all these unguarded and sort of open versions of these chat LLMs that will write these for you, right? There's the Worm GBT is the one that I think is the most popular one out there. It's basically a rip of ChatGPT to a certain extent, but it will write you phishing emails, ransomware emails. It'll write you encryption tooling. So yeah, if those tools are out there, it means that not only are the good guys or the ransomware companies not the good guys, the guys that are good at ransomware, bad guys, but the guys that are good at it, they're getting better at it. But then you put that in the hands of just your everyday little indie hacker or a little script kiddie who's able to now do some really powerful stuff because they can leverage the technology. That's scary. And that's where we've got to stay ahead of the game.
I actually got two relevant stats there. The first one is some of these tools out there will actually fully generate you the phishing website that looks exactly the same as Google login or Azure login, etc. Like almost identical. Like any product out there is for companies who want to phish. And the other one is some blockchain developer that had like $50,000 in some crypto and the keys in their GitHub, and they pushed it up accidentally to make the project public. It only took 2 minutes for the entire wallet to be drained. Like that is ridiculous. Like 2 minutes for the keys to be not only scraped but also utilized and the wallet drained.
So I've got a good story on that, and I've done that myself. And this was, I don't know how long ago. It's a blog post I put up there, but I did that when I was writing some code. I was actually writing some infrastructure as code using Terraform actually to work with VMware VMC and also do some sort of post Terraform sort of project work there. And I accidentally uploaded my Amazon AWS secret key and password as part of the code. No sooner, I remember just all of a sudden not being able to log in and upload the Terraform script. And I was like, oh, that's weird. What's going on? And then realized that when I logged into my AWS console, like in every region, about 30 or 40 instances had been spun up, and they were basically mining whatever they were mining on there. But what they also did is they deleted everything. So I got absolutely done. And that was no joke. Within again, maybe 5 minutes of me uploading that key. And then what I learned was that, they've got they're just looking for that. They're looking for dumb idiots like me who upload their keys. If they scrape GitHub and once they found them, bam, they get in there. It's really interesting how quickly that happens.
Well, they have to be fast, not because you'll find out about it, but because there's other people also scraping those same keys, hoping to find it. So you're competing against other bad guys, basically other villains, in order to beat them. Like there is a race there, and we're just out of.
Why do these people exist? Man, bad people in the world. There's bad people in the world. But I get it. People want to make money, and if people want to make money in any way they can, they'll find methods to make money any way they can, right? And that's why ransomware is big. That's why we've got all this prevalence of, attacks against companies, exfiltration. I've got your data, I'm going to sell it, because people know that people pay money for this stuff. So it's just the world that we live in, right?
I mean, I think there's a huge philosophical conundrum there, and I don't think we're going to have the time to get into it, unfortunately.
No. It's interesting. But yeah, at the end of the day, like those LLMs, they're absolutely used for good and evil. But I do believe that overall they're amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think just a lot of it comes down to our own level of trust, because you see it with people too. People form their little tight circles, and you don't trust anyone outside of your circle until like a bigger threat comes in and you need to band together. Like, okay, well now we trust those guys because there's new people that we don't trust. And I think that tools like this fall into that same pattern, because it is such a conversational interface with it that we give it like human characteristics.
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone who uses it to not treat it like a robot or not treat it like a chatbot. I would encourage people to actually interact with it in a natural way,
Right.
because I think that's the best way. That's how I think they're built and how they're designed to respond better. So, if I was giving a 101 on prompt engineering, it would be have a conversation with it first and feel good about talking with it in a natural way, and then get into the heavy stuff.
Just start every conversation with the phrase, "I, for one, welcome our AI overlords." You'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be, that part of it is going to be interesting. And look, there's no doubt that we're heading towards something like, general artificial intelligence. And I think that's exciting and scary and all of the above. But it seems like where else, if you said 5 years ago, how far away is that, we would have gone, I don't know, 10 years, 15, 20 years. Now, acceleration is significant. And, I can see it happening this decade, and I think that's kind of the trajectory that we're in. It's cool, scary, and all at the same time, isn't it?
For sure. All right. What else were we going to talk about? We had the talking about like the evolution of DevOps. We were talking about that before we started recording, and like how there's people like us who are just have like one or two things that we're good at, and then there's other people who just have this massive foundation and can just like context switch and seem to be great at everything.
Yeah, I think my first boss that I had, Alex Liffers, great guy, Australian German, so he was very meticulous. He was very German in a lot of the ways that he did a lot of things, very efficient, was very stereotypically German in that sense. And I think instilled in me a lot of my better traits in IT, because he was effectively my first mentor and teacher when I was a kid. But he was everything. We were at an internet services company, we're a hosting company. We did Windows, Linux, we ran Cisco networking gear, and he just knew he was like an expert in everything, like everything. And I was just in awe, like, just for him to be the because he had to be, right? Because we're a small company. He had to know how to do the BGP, the DNS, the load balancing, but then he'd basically code our website, he'd code our billing system, and then he would do the setup of the Active Directory, and then the Linux setup and everything, like just literally everything. He'd set up the SAN. So whatever he did, whatever was in IT, he was that guy. So he was like one of the original, I guess, DevOps guys because he had to be. And so you do find guys like that. They're kind of unicorny though. I don't think they exist honestly very much in terms of people that can do literally everything at a super high level. And sometimes you find other guys that are really good at coding plus infrastructure, or infrastructure plus storage, or networking plus something. But yeah, it's very hard to be good at everything at a super ultra high level in this industry, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And it gets increasingly more difficult every year as we add new technologies. Like a couple years from now, tops, a lot of the companies we work for will have their own LLMs, and it'll be an integral part of their business. And somebody's going to have to, build, operate, maintain, and scale that. And that'll be another skill set that we have to figure out how to do.
Yeah, and I think DevOps, it had a bad. I used to joke with Michael actually about this. We both used to joke about it, and now it's quite ironic that he's effectively built an accelerated brand off his 90 days of DevOps, right? Because we used to just give it shit. We used to go, we're going to grow a beard and think we're smart. And we used to joke about that at actual presentations that we used to do. We used to go like so DevOps that we're doing like a Terraform code and building out our VMC infrastructure and doing this and that. But I think absolutely there's a great play for it now where the platform engineering / DevOps has just come in, because you have to be that person. You have to know how to consume, read a bit of Terraform, read infrastructure as code, read some Python to do this or that. It's critical to everything that we do. So I think it's just entering that mainstream, and it's not a case of, this guy's a DevOps guy, this guy's a platform guy, or whatever. I think everyone has had to be dragged up in a way to be able to be a DevOps or platform engineer of sorts today. If you're not a pure coder, like still got the pure coders, they'll always be there. But in terms of infrastructure, understanding what it is, I think there should always be, well, I personally think you should always know about the system that you're deploying. You should always know and not just treat it like a black box. That's kind of been my methodology in my career, is to not just accept something that's given to you. And I think there's a danger in sort of the way that we do things today, where we just accept that a machine is going to get built, or we accept that a bunch of AWS services are going to be deployed and they do this and that. But just taking the time to go back and actually understand the mechanics of it is still very important. So I think that kind of differentiates a few people as well.
I mean, I think you really hit on an important thing there, because I think this is what really led into the whole DevOps mindset movement. Is you have to understand 100%, like as much as possible in the ecosystem that you're building in, what you're writing code and deploying. A single team is cross-functional and responsible for everything. And that at the same time, there's more and more that we have to learn about and know. And maybe really the only way in which we can be successful is if we are adding LLMs as our team members to actually expand out our knowledge and expertise there, because there is just more and more things that I just don't think anyone can reasonably become an expert in 100% of everything they should be.
No, and if anyone kind of says they are an expert, probably don't believe them, right?
Right.
It's the Dunning-Kruger curve there, right?
Yeah.
That's been one of the things I've struggled with for people, because I feel I have a lot of empathy for people who are just starting a career in infrastructure or platform engineering or DevOps, whatever you want to call it, because there is so much to take in. Like I know a lot of it, but only because I've been doing this for 3 decades. Like if I were to start today, that's one of the things I try to do, is for people who are just starting. It's like, how do I condense 3 decades of things into a digestible format for them so that they can build on top of what I learned instead of having to relearn what I've learned.
Yeah, and I think, someone actually, a guy called Suresh, who is the CEO for Platform 9, who I'm not sure if you guys know Platform 9. They started off in KVM-based hosting with VMware, and now they basically do Kubernetes-based platforming on AWS. But he told me way back when that the developers of today are just in a different class to what you think the developers of 5 years ago were and what they were, because what they're learning at uni is something completely different. Like I learned Turbo Pascal at uni, right? Like, or maybe some people older than me would have learned COBOL or whatever it might have been, right? And then it went to Java, then it went to this, and now they're learning .NET, and now they're learning Python, and so it's just accelerating. But the big thing that stuck out to me wasn't so much about the code; it was more about these new developers that are coming out, or the new breed of IT guys. If you ask them what a storage platform is, they'll say, "Oh, MongoDB or Cassandra or one of those databases, not an actual storage system, not a disk." So they're abstracted up a couple of layers, right? And they might even say, the next ones might say, "Oh, well, what's my storage? Well, it's my MongoDB database sitting on MongoDB." You know what I mean? So there's this level of continual growth and abstraction that's happening with these guys. So they don't need to know what's underneath. So those guys don't care about the storage. They don't care about the spinning disk or the NVMe drives they're running it, or the servers. All they care about is the interface into that MongoDB server.
Right.
And that's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the level of abstraction is just, we're abstracting the abstractions now.
Absolutely.
I mean, I actually think it even goes further than that. And just as where we're currently at, I've seen university students for their senior thesis basically building something that runs on AWS as the project, which is just so much far removed from like even what I was doing initially. Like I had to teach the first company that multiple companies that I had worked at, like what Git was and like what version control was. Like I was teaching them that, and I didn't learn that at the university. That was just like what I was doing. They didn't have that, but now that's just a class that they have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the difference, is because that is a skill that's required when they hit the workforce today, because everyone kind of needs to know it. So, yeah, things move on, and I'm sure to tie it back, tie the knot in it to the LLM talk. Absolutely, you're going to get prompt engineering courses within university, if not they're already happening, like pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I would expect so. Be interesting to see the curriculum on those.
Yeah, don't swear. Yeah, don't be nasty to it. Was like 101.
Right.
Just in case.
Right, because if you're in college now, you likely will live long enough to see this thing have a real world interface, and it's going to come back with those things you said.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Should we do some picks?
Yeah, I'm excited about this.
All right, cool. Warren, can you kick us off?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been holding this particular pick for a few weeks now, because I knew the episode on prompt engineering was coming. So if you're unfamiliar with the newsletter TLDR, there's a TLDR security written by Clint Gibler and Remy McCarthy, who are absolutely fantastic. And they put together 50 plus research papers. They found them, they distilled them down, like really went deep what they mean. And there's a GitHub repository on prompt injection defenses. I highly recommend, if you're anywhere near the area, the industry, to take a look. It's quite good summary of like what the problems are and how they're being solved or even start to be tackled. And there's some really clever things in there, like, someone can tell our LLM to do something bad, and so like how do you get around that? One of them I found really interesting was, run it like back through itself, like get the result and then like parse it and then like pass it back through the same LLM or like another LLM and see if that one was validated. And so using a graph of LLMs, get them to sort of validate the response from a different one and whether or not that's it. Because like even if you can get over the system prompt of the first one, if the output of that has to still match the second one that you're able to have better security over, you can subvert attacks that way. And the list goes on and on. I think there's over 50 in there.
Nice.
Right on. Cool. All right, Anthony, what'd you bring for a pick?
I got two, and they're both related to AI and all that kind of stuff. So the first one is Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. So I listened to this maybe a year and a half, actually it was before ChatGPT came up, but it's effectively about the coming age of AI and whatnot. But the first prologue is effectively, it's a story, and it's worth reading for it alone. It's called the Amiga Project, and it's effectively, about an AI that's been developed by a company, kept secret, taps into the internet, gets sentient, starts to build in itself and get better, and then effectively controls the world. But it's not a bad story. It's a great story. But it's actually coming to life right now. Like the actual, it's a prophetic look at what's happening with ChatGPT and the LLMs today. So that's a big one that I would recommend. And the other one, which is actually really cool, is more about that second part that we're talking about, is called Novacine by James Lovelock. So James Lovelock worked, he only died a few years ago. He was about 100 and something, but he's basically the guy that invented microwaves and that sort of stuff. Like that dude, he worked in Area 51 and whatnot. But this book is all about the coming age of hyperintelligence, and effectively goes AI to cyborgs and what happens when cyborgs basically start to get as smart as humans. And effectively the end of the story is, do cyborgs need humans or do humans need cyborgs? And then it kind of revolves around there. So that's a really cool read. I think it's a short read as well. You can get through it in about 8 hours. But that's one of my favorite all-time books, Novacine by James Lovelock.
Right on. Cool. So this week I'm here fishing for picks because I was out. We went out this last weekend. I made a long weekend out of it. We were out in the mountains, no cell phone service, not even any radio stations. And I came back and I can't log into my computer, my MacBook. Like, I have no idea what the password is. For years, it's been muscle memory, and every once in a while I'll change it by just changing the keystrokes a bit, but it's not anything. It's not a word, it's not a phrase, it's not anything written down, and it's also gone from my brain. Like, whatever brain cells were responsible for holding that, they're freaking dead. So I'm here fishing for picks. If anyone has any ideas, recommendations, or strategies for storing those root credentials, I could use a new one. So if you got any ideas, hit me up on X or leave comments in the show, however you want to do that.
I got a good one for you.
Okay.
Depending on what you're using, I've got a YubiKey that I plug in that automatically decrypts my hard drive, and it's got its own pin, but it's very short. And so I just plug that in and leave it there, and it's on my keychain, and pull it out. So it doesn't matter. Like, I don't ever need to remember what password is there unless I lost the keychain as well. And if I forget, I'll update it right now and validate. Like, every year I have a reminder set, do you still remember the password, and type it out. And if I don't, I'll set a new one.
Isn't that funny about passwords like that? Like you said it, like I think if you ask anyone, most people, unless they're really security conscious, and there's some real security nuts out there,
That's me, right?
they will basically have that same password that's muscle memory, but slightly altered. Maybe it's 2 numbers that they change every now and again, maybe. So I think majority of people do that because that's just what we know. It's easy.
Yeah.
So don't feel bad about that. But yeah, maybe the fact that your muscle memory is gone, I don't know.
Right.
Get that checked maybe.
I mean,
Right, because that's
if
the big concern. It's like, okay, I forgot my password. What else have I forgotten that I'm going to need someday? How
there's a
deep
couple-
did this go?
yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is, Will, that unless you actually damage those neurons, the pathways are still there. You need to re-trigger them, but the connections in the neural net that's processing over those neurons does degrade. So you can retrain it by going through whatever process you would normally go through, and try to get your hands in the right spot on the keyboard, and it may come back to you.
Or just go to Elon. He's got like a little plug-in to the head now.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sure you guys have seen like the similar tweets and stuff similar to where they'll tweet someone at CIA, say, hey, I forgot this piece of information. Can you guys send me your backup copy of it? I'll send out a tweet at CIA. Can you send me my password?
Somebody will do it.
Cool. All right. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a great chat.
This has been really fun, actually. I really enjoyed the conversation. Love it. It's been good. We've gone in different places. And Warren, I reckon you talked about ads. I reckon you're going to get ads about black pudding now. So just get ready for that.
Right. For sure. There is. So I can say that Amazon seems to have improved their ad platform a lot, because I used to have this running joke with a really good friend of mine where we would find less than professional things for sale on on Amazon and send each other links, masking them or whatever, just to get the other person to click on them. And then every time they logged into Amazon in front of their wife or something, there would be these really odd ads, and it was just great fun. But then I had another friend who, I think it's been about 2 years ago now. He was having open heart surgery, and we were really concerned about him. And so I wanted to make sure that he was in a good mood before he went to the hospital that morning. So I went on Amazon and I ordered a blow-up sex doll. And then I took it around to all my friends, and, we all wrote stupid stuff on it. And then I filled it with helium and tied it to his mailbox so that whenever his wife took him to the hospital that morning, there was a blow-up sex doll flying above his house. And so I was really worried about the next time I logged into Amazon after that, like thinking, okay, what are they going to show me? I didn't get anything, like not even like, hey, here's other sex dolls. Yeah, here's other sex dolls you might be interested in, or here's things to go with the sex. None of that stuff. I didn't get anything. So they appear to have done some work there.
Yeah, or maybe there's this one type of sex doll on Amazon. You bought it, and that was it.
It was the only one they sell.
The only one they sell. That's it. You got the premium model.
Right.
Bam, bam.
This is our top of the line model.
Speaking of cyborgs, yeah. Anyway, we can go down the wrong path.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. Anthony, thank you. Warren, thank you. And to all our listeners, thank you for listening and supporting the show. And we'll see y'all next week.
Definitely.